Today is Friday, it's November the 12th, and my joy to come to you with today's devotional commentary, the title, A Cancer Called Adultery. And the text for today, our scripture reading, is Proverbs chapter 7. Now, Proverbs 7 is continuing Solomon's warnings concerning the devastating consequences of immorality, a theme you will find throughout the book of Proverbs. Now, I encourage you to read all of Proverbs 7 for your scripture reading today. But for this devotional, for the sake of brevity, my focus will be only on the first 7 verses. Now, we begin with Proverbs 7 and verse 1 through 3, and I'm calling this the Preamble of the chapter itself. Solomon writes to his son, "My son, keep my words," literally observe or preserve my words, my sayings, my speeches, and lay up or treasure my commandments with thee. What are commandments? They are really the do's and the don'ts. In verse 2, Solomon wrote, "Keep my commandments and live, and my law," my instructions, my teaching, "as the apple," literally the pupil, "of thine eye." And then he gets on, he says regarding the law and the commandments that he has taught his son, "Bind them upon thy fingers," as you see instructed in Deuteronomy chapter 6. "Write," or literally engrave or record them upon the table of thine heart. What is the heart? It is our mind. It is our thoughts. It's the seat of our affection. So take the law, take the commandments of the Father, bind them and engrave them upon your heart. Now, Solomon, in his chapters that we find in the book of Proverbs, was concerned that his son, the future king of Israel, would not be led astray by sexual lust. He had witnessed in his own family life the sorrow, the tragedy caused by his mother, Bathsheba, and his father, David's adultery. Unfortunately for Solomon, though, he walked in the same kind of path, and it was it was one that neither his parents nor his God would have condoned. The king fell into the practice that I often see in 21st century fathers. He modeled the parenting philosophy: don't do as I do, do as I say. Well, we read in 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 4, "Sadly, it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives," and he had many wives, "turned away his heart after other gods." His heart was not perfect, not whole, not complete with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. Proverbs 7 and then in verses 1 through 3, embracing the wisdom embodied that we find there, I would ask you to consider a two-pronged application. The first is this: parents, mom and dad, you must call your sons and daughters to moral purity and address the moral character of your children by your words and example. And then the second thought for sons and daughters: wise sons and daughters are under obligation to cherish, to keep their parents' instructions and recall them to heart when temptations rise. And then that brings us to verse 4 and 5, which I'm calling the subtlety of flattering lips. Solomon goes on in his instructions to his son, and he begins to warn his son about being careful about the woman that would come to you with flattery. Proverbs 7 and verse 4, "Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister. Call understanding thy kinswoman, and that as it should be." Why? That they, wisdom and understanding, may keep or preserve or be a hedge about thee from the strange, or that is the immoral woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. Solomon was concerned with the enticements of a strange woman, an immoral woman, and he urged his son to love wisdom as a sister, understanding, discernment, and insight as an intimate friend. And tragically, it was not what Solomon taught, but what he practiced that became his son's moral guide. Now, I want to give a scriptural illustration as part of this devotional today. And it's found in Genesis chapter 13, where I would suggest the title would be A Father's Haunting Failure. You know, no parent can afford the luxury of failing to address the sexual perils of a deviant society, the one in which we find ourselves living. And yet, I'm afraid that some fathers and mothers follow the reckless path of Lot. In Genesis 13, we see that he moves his family from the company and the influence of a godly man, his uncle Abraham. And where did he move? He moved into Sodom, an ancient city that was known for its perversity and its unrestrained wickedness. Genesis 14. Lot failed to teach and admonish his children the fear of the Lord. And when he learned God's judgment was imminent, he made a futile attempt to cause his family, his sons, his daughters, his sons-in-laws to flee the city. And tragically, we read in Genesis 19 and verse 14, his sons-in-law refused his warning, for he appeared to them as one that made fun, mocked. It was not a serious matter. Why? Because Lot had failed his children to teach them and to admonish them by his word and his example to fear the Lord. Now, I have a closing thought for you today, and it is this. Solomon urged his son to hear and remember his words and to engrave his instructions upon his heart to serve as a moral compass. Instead, it was what Solomon modeled, not what he taught, that influenced his children's lives. Are you vigilant regarding the dangers posed by an immoral culture? Are you modeling and guiding your children to take the high road in moral choices? Are you leading your family to seek the company and friendship of the godly? Remember, sexual immorality is a moral cancer to your life, your career, your marriage, and your family. Seek the Lord. Engrave His word, His commandments on your heart. And beware of flattering lips. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today. And bye-bye.